Hello and welcome to the Penalty Box Perspective podcast. My name's Nathaniel and I'm joined once again not only by my good friend Matt, but we also have a very special guest with us here today. Do you want to introduce him, Matt?
Very, very fortunate to be welcomed here today by one of the writers for the AllCity network, as well as one of the co-hosts of the CHGO Blackhawks podcast, Mr. Mario Tirabassi. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No, it's our pleasure, honestly, and thank you very much for taking the time to do this with us. Our first ever guest on the Penalty Box Perspective. So really happy to have you on, and
I'm honored
to chat some Blackhawks from your side of the pond across 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome stuff. So first and foremost, for people who might not have a bit of a background into yourself, you're one of the writers for CHGO for the AllCity network. You're also one of the co-hosts of the CHGO Blackhawks podcast. So just sort of very quickly for our listeners, sort of what's your sort of day-to-day role within both the AllCity network and sort of how it looks for you around the Blackhawks?
Yeah, so since we launched in March of 2022, I've been part of the Blackhawks group here in Chicago, covering the team along with Jay Zawoski and Greg Boyson, who was with us full time and is now kind of in a contract position. But we've kind of been a unique group for CHGO in that all three of us and Jay and I now still with CHGO officially, we all kind of do the same things. We all write about the team. We all go to practices. We all go to games. We have all been part of the podcast show as well. So whereas other groups, if you're talking about the Bears or the Cubs, the Bulls, like all the groups that we have, there's more or less different people in different roles, but we've been unique where we're all kind of in the same boat. So it's going to practices, it's going to games, morning skates, it's talking to players, talking to the coach, going to different events, just being up front with the team and trying to bridge that gap between the fan base and the team itself. And it's funny trying to kind of run that line of being in the journalist side of things, being in the locker room, talking to the players, covering the team that way, but also still connecting to the fan base and being a fan myself and ourselves, and tapping into that as well. We want to be able to bring that passion and energy of a fan, but also kind of bridging that gap with like the information coming straight from the sources and being the ones being able to ask about different things, specific things, and get that information. So it's a unique position. It's something that I don't think a lot of people within not just the hockey world, but the sports media world, there's not a lot of people who are quote unquote beat writers that also have an outlet where, they're talking, on either a radio station or a TV station or a podcast where they can be open and honest as a fan. And we have that platform. So it's an interesting bridge to cross sometimes, but I love being able to do that.
Yeah, and you can really see that as well. I mean, I've listened to, I think, must have been every episode of CHGO since it launched. I was there with the Madhouse beforehand. I'm a CHGO diehard as well, so I read everything that you guys do and listen to it all as well. And I think you're absolutely right in the fact that I think you guys provide a really unique insight, obviously with you all being fans of the team as well, but also sort of the professional aspect, which I think creates for such good content, and I think that's reflected in how well you guys are doing.
Thank you.
No, thank you. No, pleasure. So it's been a big season for the Blackhawks, really, alongside obviously everything with the Centennial, but behind the bench as well. Obviously, Jeff Blashill's come in, replacing Anders Sorensen from last season, and Luke Richardson before that. So, just from your perspective as someone who's around the team at practices, press conferences, and even in the locker room with the players, how has everything been, both behind the scenes as well as the sort of on ice product, both at practice and what you see actually being at the games in comparison to the previous coaches? How has it differed?
I think the first difference that I think was really evident through the training camp was the efficiency expected and the accountability expected from the players that Blashill had, that he brought to the table. I think, right off the bat, that first practice, if passes weren't crisp, if you were getting the drill wrong, it was immediate consequence. It was skate a lap. It was, he's dropping F-bombs 10 minutes into his first practice, and it just the accountability of get it right was a big difference. And I think, not to say that things went unpunished, or there weren't consequences under Luke Richardson. I just think that the expectation and the standard, even in practice, was set higher and had a more firm, it was just a stronger expectation so far from Blashill, and I think the players have really responded to it, especially looking forward to this season and beyond. A lot of the guys that really quote unquote matter, a lot of these young players, they're responding really positively to how Blashill has been running practices, how the expectations he's setting. And then also, you have a group of veteran players that, over the last 2 years where Luke Richardson was running things, we heard from Nick Foligno talking about communication with the coaching staff and having to go to the coaching staff and saying, like, we need to change how we're practicing. We need different, we just need a different feel to practice to make it more efficient, because the players weren't responding well to it. We've heard from Jason Dickinson talking about, how coaching styles have adapted and changed over the years, but there's still players like himself that sometimes need either teammates or coaches to get in his face or really emphasize the point that they're trying to make by maybe chewing him out once in a while. Like, I think you're seeing a positive response from the whole group to what Blashill has been implementing so far. And I think on the ice, we're already seeing it through, the first 5 games of the season. This is a team that's been able to be in every game that they've played. They've won their last 2, and the last game that they played was against the Blues, and it was an 8-3 win. It was a really emphatic win, and just the feeling of this group under Jeff Blashill is a lot different than it was under Richardson and under Sorensen. And I guess, the talent level, maybe it's a little bit improved year over year, but I think the expectation and how you want things to look and feel is a lot different. And I think there isn't an expectation to win so much this year, but I think there's a feeling of they could win seemingly, so far at least, every game that they've been in. So that's a lot different than it was the last 2 seasons, where you would the team would step on the ice and you would know they're going to lose. So far through 5 games, there really hasn't been that feeling. Even the Florida game, like, the first period was rough, but they actually came back and made a game of it, which wasn't the expectation and really wasn't the standard of what we had seen the last 2 years. So I think just that, the standard being set, the expectations being set, and the accountability for not reaching it, I think is a lot different, and it's making a big change for this group so far.
So I'll be in alignment with that. Being as a Wild fan myself, coming into this season, looking at the Blackhawks, I thought, are they really going to make that sort of next step? And what does that look like in the eyes of, I guess, the fans? And I think it'd be a bit unrealistic to expect potentially playoff hockey at the end of the year, but it's just, does it look good on ice? And even from a Wild fan, I've been super impressed with the competitive levels and the commitment levels from the team this season. They could have won every game. They've been involved, battling, and I think it's great to see on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, the fan base for sure. They have their standards too, and I think a lot of people do understand the rebuild and the timeline, and don't have high expectations. But there's also a very vocal group of the fan base that, this is a team not that far removed. I know it's been 10 years since their last one, but not that far removed from winning 3 Stanley Cups, and a majority portion of the fan base, that's the big, like, sticking point of when they became fans of when the Blackhawks became fun again for them. So they want that feeling again. They want to feel like they can turn on the game and watch competitive hockey and watch a team win and be in the playoffs. And, not only Blackhawks fans, but just the city of Chicago needs a team like that. So I think there's a big hunger for winning to be there, but I think there is a more larger understanding that it's taken some time, but there really is, like, that high standard of, like, you at least this season need to be watchable. And I think so far through 5 games, you've had very watchable hockey.
Yeah, I would agree with that big time. I mean, both myself and Nathaniel, we watched the Florida game. It was on at 10 p.m. in the UK, so it was a more reasonable time for us than it would be usually. And that first period, it was rough. But after that, they really sort of clawed their way back into the game a bit. There was some, fantastic battling, and again, it was a game they could have won. I would go as far to say the game that they would be least deserving to have won so far this season was probably the Mammoth game that they did win. But to go from that to the performance they put in against St. Louis, where they absolutely bullied them all over the ice, every single metric, every stat you could have looked at, they just absolutely dominated them. But, we can hope that everything carries on this way. I think they've got, the players and the hunger to do it. And it's not necessarily about the wins in the column, but more how it looks. And we're seeing that commitment from, towards the younger players. And we saw that last season when the likes of Nazar came over from Rockford, and we saw Rinzel at the end of the year. We saw Levshinov for a little bit at the end of the year. Obviously, they're all playing full time now. And I think last season when that happened, it was around when Nazar came in, there was a bit of that culture shift in the locker room, and it started to, like, the torch was passing over from the veteran guys over to the younger guys. Again, just as someone who's in the locker room a lot, has that carried on? Does it definitely feel like the young players' room now?
Yeah, it definitely does. At the end of last season, Nick Foligno talked about, eventually he would be handing over the team, and just, saying that as captain is one thing. And, this has been Bedard's team since the Blackhawks won the 2023 draft lottery. Like, it's been Bedard's team, even though Foligno has been, the captain now. This is his second season doing it. So, but he talked about, like, wanting to be able to pass over the team to that next group, and it's, including Bedard, including Nazar, including, Rinzel and Levshinov and Colton Dock and Korchinski and Nolan Allen, like, all these guys that are part of it. You want to feel good about who you're handing it off to, and how you're doing that. And he said that at the end of last season. Through training camp, through the preseason, through the start of this year, it's been very evident that the comfort level of this group of young players is way different than it's ever been. I remember we talked with Alex Vlasic about when he made his NHL debut. It was at the the end of the 21-22 season. So Jonathan Toews is still there. Patrick Kane is still there. And he walked into that locker room and as a rookie and was told us, like, you know, there was a lot of kind of that walking on eggshells kind of feeling of not necessarily that you'd face the wrath of Toews and Kane, but that they, you know, if you messed up, like, you're answering to two legends, you're answering to Hall of Famers, and there is there's just this air that those guys had, that young players like that stepping in the locker room, even though it's been years since those guys were winning Stanley Cups and the Blackhawks were, you know, in that position, that still holds weight. So now fast forward for a young guy, you know, say for example, Oliver Moore, right? Stepping into his first professional season, he is surrounded by Nazar and Bedard and Vlasic and Reichel and Renzel and Doc and like all these guys, you know, Levshinov, like all these guys that are also 20 and 21 and 22 years old. And it's no longer this, you know, group of veterans and a handful of young players. It's a group of young players and a handful of veterans. And it's really shifted over. And, you know, the comfort level that you can see, you know, after practices, after morning skates, just the cohesion of the group, the energy level in the room, it tends to be driven by the young guys. And that's not to say that the veterans are separate, but it just feels like the young players there's more of them. They've come up together for the last few seasons, whether it's been through the off-ice prospect camps, being teammates in college and junior hockey, or, you know, playing for Rockford together and then coming up to Chicago. Like, these guys have come up together as a group, and it really feels like that group is expanding and being more comfortable in the locker room, being more comfortable as NHL players, as established guys. And it's a definite change and shift in that sense of the culture of the team than it was even 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, completely agree. And you talked about Nick Foligno and you know, him wanting to hand the team off in, you know, to the right group of guys. And I've known ever since Nick Foligno stepped through the door at Chicago, he's always seemed like someone who has very much bought into what the Blackhawks are doing, and how he can play a role in bringing through those guys. And I know we saw them over the summer, like, you know, them going and doing team building work with the Folignos up at their kind of home, and, you know, just bonding together and getting themselves into that position where, you know, whether this is his last season or not. I mean, I think he's looked pretty good so far this season. I think there's maybe a little bit more hockey in there, you know, somewhere in the bottom of the tank, but I think he's looked fantastic. And just in terms of the young players themselves then, you know, looking outside of the Bedards and even Nazar to an extent, although I would say he would be a candidate for this, which of the young players, in terms of the application, both at practice and then when they've actually, you know, stepped into the game, you know, who's impressed you the most as someone who sees them sort of day in, day out, or maybe someone who you weren't expecting to maybe be quite as good as they are?
I think one of the guys in that young group that has taken leaps and bounds forward beyond maybe what was even expected of him at his ceiling is Wyatt Kaiser. He was a guy that was, you know, a 3rd round pick, played about, I think it was 3 seasons he played in college, and then turned pro and bounced back and forth between, you know, extended stays in Rockford, and then he'd come up to Chicago, play a little bit, then go back down, come back and come, you know, back and forth. And I think you got the sense that maybe that's just kind of going to be his professional life, that maybe it's, you know, he's pretty effective in the AHL, maybe is just a bottom pair guy in the NHL, if that. Then he kind of figured out his game a little bit more, matured a little bit more in his game at the NHL level, and then found a consistent role later in last season with the Blackhawks. And then this offseason, the waiting on what was his contract extension got a little interesting because it was unexpected. And then as you're down to, okay, 2 weeks, 1 week, 2 days, day before training camp, you're like, what is this bottom pair defenseman who hasn't played a full season in the NHL before? Why are we waiting till the very last minute to get this deal done with this guy? Is it, are they apart on the length of the contract? Are they apart on the money of the deal? Does he think he's more important than he actually is? And I know Jay and I, as we were going through that process and kind of waiting on that deal, we started kind of convincing ourselves like, he has no leverage. The Blackhawks are going to be fine without him. He is a number 6 defenseman, like all that stuff. And then he signs his deal, he gets into camp and everything, and he has been, through 5 games, the best defenseman that this team has. He has been the most reliable. He's been the most consistent. He's been the most effective. Putting up points is not a big part of his game, but he's gotten so good at playing through transition, setting up offense, stopping plays at the defensive side of things. And I think not only is what he's doing on the ice very effective, very important to the team, he's also being tasked with being primarily Artem Levshinov's defensive partner. And Artem Levshinov is a guy that this organization is putting a lot of chips in, being the number 2 pick and eventually becoming a number 1 defenseman that you can play 20 plus minutes a night and is going to be, your power play guy, your a potential do-it-all type of player. And because of Wyatt Kaiser, Artem Levshinov is starting to kind of take that next step and round that corner early on in his career. So I think what's been asked of Wyatt Kaiser and what he's done and the expectations that he had when he first joined the organization, he has skyrocketed. Like, you can have high expectations for Kevin Korchinski as a first-round pick. You can have high expectations for Oliver Moore as a first-round pick. You can have high expectations for a guy like AJ Spellici, who was a third-round pick, but also has had really good steps moving forward. But for a guy to be a third-round pick and looked like he just was going to go into the shuffle of defensemen to now being, he's one of the most important defensemen they have, that's a huge leap forward for him. And Jay and I, we've said, like, looking at how he's performed and what role he's played and what he's going to continue to play, and he's still a young guy developing his game too. Like, he is way more important than we gave him credit for to what this team is trying to accomplish. So yeah, I would say, as far as like from 3-4 years ago to now, I think Wyatt Kaiser is probably the guy that's exceeded expectations, and there's still way more hockey for him to play.
Yeah, I would second every bit of that. I think he's been outstanding through those first 5 games, and yeah, really interesting to see talk about how he's sort of elevated his levels and surpassed. Because that's the thing with a rebuild, is you're always when you're making so many picks at the draft, you're always going to have people who exceed, maybe some people who don't quite pan out to what you were expecting, and some guys who are going to hit right where you thought they would. But the more guys who exceed, then the more likely your rebuild is going to be being successful. So no, it's really, really good to see. And just as a little side note, just with the young guys, myself and Nathaniel especially, we've both been incredibly impressed with Spencer Knight as well, and how he's done in his first full season as a starter. Obviously, he had a great tutelage under Sergei Bobrovsky at Florida, but been super impressed with Knight as well, both on the ice and off the ice as well. He's a very insightful guy.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed him being on the team and being a part of the group, and it's a guy that they needed. They needed a young goalie that you could point to and say, like, that's the guy of the future. And yeah, anytime he's talked, he's said something, at least one thing that holds a lot of weight and is very insightful. So he's been a great addition to the team.
Yeah, no, he's been terrific, and I think when that Seth Jones trade happened last season, I don't think anyone would have anticipated Spencer coming back the other way.
No, not at all.
No, I was gobsmacked at the time. Well, look, Mario, you've been super generous with your time. I know Nathaniel just wanted to ask you one quick final question. Now, Nathaniel's a massive NFL fan, so Nathaniel, I'll let you rip with this one.
Yeah, obviously I don't follow Blackhawks in great level of detail, but I saw a tweet the other day sort of showing off of all the Blackhawks prospects that aren't currently playing with them in the NHL and how well they're doing, and one of them was Mason West.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts? Are there any concerns about him choosing the football route instead of the hockey route?
I don't think so. I think he sounds pretty committed to the plan of him going with hockey. I think his recruiting path with football, it looked like he was going to be getting some, mid-level scholarship opportunities, which, look, that is wonderful. To be playing Division I college football is a big accomplishment for anybody that has that desire to do so. To be able to do that is a big thing. But I think when you look at, paths to a long-term career, a professional career, going the hockey route, I think, is going to be his better option. Because through hockey, he has already committed to play at Michigan State. And if you're read up on college hockey, Michigan State is one of the 3 or 4 best programs in college hockey right now. So comparatively, if he were to go to, I'm just trying to think of some of the schools that he was recruited to for football. I think Kent State was one of them, right? If he were to go to Kent State and play football there, sure, you're going to be a quarterback at a Division I college football team. But it's a lot different than trying to go the path of being eventually a top 6 or a top line player at Michigan State, where you're going to be at the forefront of visibility for the NHL, at the forefront of visibility for Team USA hockey. If it comes to it, for him being potentially considered for a World Juniors team or anything like that. Like, he is going to be looked at on the professional path way more than he would for football. Not to say that, mid-level colleges don't produce NFL players, but the percentage chance of that happening over the path that he's taking, I think, is way less. So I'm not really concerned about his potential to switch his mind and follow football. I'm also not all that well versed in the intricacies of Minnesota high school football. And he's been putting up good numbers and good stats. I don't know if he's a generational football talent. I don't know if he's a generational hockey talent either, but I think there is an easier path for him to get to the pro game with hockey than it is with football. So I'm not really concerned. Now, if he was a prospect and could play for the Bears, that's another thing. I think they could. I think they might be interested in that. But no, I think his path to playing professional hockey is probably his better route.
That's the perfect answer I wanted to hear.
I have a question for you guys. So I have a question for you guys. How did you not only get into hockey but choose the Blackhawks and the Wild from your perspective? Because I'm always interested in I know hockey is a big international game, but maybe not necessarily in the UK. And I'm always fascinated when I come across fans in the UK of hockey specifically. So how did you guys get into it?
So I specifically got into hockey through the NHL video games. One of my closest friends was a massive Pittsburgh Penguins fan. So we first got into playing NHL in 2015, believe it or not.
Okay.
Good time to hop on the ride.
Yes.
For 1 year anyway.
Yeah.
So I was just sort of rattling through all the teams, trying to find, a team to play his Penguins with, and stumbled upon Chicago, who happened to have a stacked roster to say the least. I also have some family in Illinois,
Oh,
so that
okay.
kind of helped my decision a little bit there. And then yeah, like I know my dad's a big Chicago Bulls fan, so it's always my grandparents lived in Chicago briefly for a couple of years, so it's always kind of a city that I've had quite a nice bit of like affinity to anyway. So that made the decision, quite straightforward for me. Loved the logo, loved the jerseys. I didn't even know anything at the time about the run they were on with that dynasty team. Literally hopped on, for that season, and then they won a cup. So it was a fantastic start to
Maybe you were the
my
jinx.
hockey fandom. And
Started
then
the descent there, I think.
yeah. So yeah, I think it's probably my fault that they haven't kicked on.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
How did you become a Wild fan, Nathaniel?
Well, to be fair, like I've predominantly been an NFL fan um, for many, many years. It's only been in the past sort of 4 or 5 years I've really got into hockey proper.
Okay.
I've always kept half an eye on it, but I like Minnesota sports in general. I like teams with different uniforms. I like the green. So I've got like no links to America, no NHL video game sort of victory special there. It's just I don't know. You just kind of pick a team, and I like them. I don't like being a glory supporter. I also don't like watching miserable hockey like week in week out. So
Okay.
I think the Minnesota Wild are yeah, a pretty good
Yeah.
selection there. But I've always end up with a decent team, but I'm not there like glory supporting either.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It is tough sometimes trying to consume NHL content sort of in this country, which is a part of the reason why why we started the podcast as a whole, was to try and provide a bit of a platform to British fans who maybe aren't able to keep up with things as much as they'd like.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why we started. But we're both sort of fanatics of the sport. Fortunately, the job that we both do allows us to catch a few games later on. So yeah, it's we've really enjoyed doing this as well. And honestly, it's I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on with us and chat Hawks with us. I could talk Blackhawks hockey for hours upon end, but I'm sure you've got things to do this afternoon before the big game tonight.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on, and yeah, I think it's awesome what you guys are doing with the podcast, and providing that outlet that I not that I'm aware of how many hockey podcasts are out in the UK, but I'd imagine that you guys are probably providing a lot for people over there to just kind of dip their toes into it, and kind of get an understanding of what's going on if they are interested in it. So that's really cool.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Yeah, there is a bit of a void of hockey podcasts in the UK as a whole, so there's definitely a little bit of a gap for us to jump into. Well, look, you are welcome back anytime. But no, again, sincerely, thank you from the both of us,
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
and enjoy the game tonight, and I'll be tuning into the post game.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, it
All
should be
right,
a good one.
take it easy, Mario. Thank you very much.
See you guys.
Thank you so much, Mario. Take care.
Massive thanks again to Mario Tirabassi from the CHGO Blackhawks podcast for joining us. First guest on the podcast. Had a great time. Nathaniel, enjoy talking Hawks hockey there.
Yeah, well, I just had a right old time sat listening to the both of you going back and forth. It was a really a great time listening to Mario. He's obviously very knowledgeable, great guy. I learnt a lot for sure. But yeah, it's really exciting. I think for you now to be a Blackhawks fan. I'm all aboard. I know I don't really support the team, but I don't want bad things for you either.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think certainly the national scope on the team is definitely going to increase, and I think a lot of people are going to be sitting up and taking notice of the Blackhawks a lot more this year than they have done the last couple. Like Mario was saying, the likes of Wyatt Kaiser, and obviously we're seeing with Frank Nazar and Spencer Knight, and it's showing that this team is not just Connor Bedard and the rest of the team. So yeah, I'm really excited for what the rest of the season's going to bring.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear about Wyatt Kaiser because obviously I know the name, but I guess that's kind of the point when you got a stud defenseman up and coming, or he's doing really well. Quite often with young or third line defensemen, you kind of don't want to hear about them because if you hear
Yeah,
about them, it's generally because they've made a mistake or
yeah,
dropped a pass or something
yeah,
like
for
that.
sure.
Whereas if they're just solid, doing good enough, even if they're not getting the points because it's not their job, but I mean, I was looking while you were talking about it. He's on a +5 on the Chicago team, 5 games in.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
absolutely. And he's been, a lot of the stats and metrics and things point to him defensively. I mean, I know we're only 4 or 5 games in, but point to him being one of the best defensive defensemen in the league already this year. So he's playing really, really well. And, after that dominant performance against the St. Louis Blues, hoping they can follow it up with another win against Vancouver tonight. That'd top it off quite nicely and put the Blackhawks in quite a nice little position, I think.
Yeah, very good.
So, if anyone wants to read up on Mario's work, you can find the CHGO Blackhawks podcast at allchgo.com. As he mentioned, he hosts the podcast with Jay Zawoski. They both write articles on there. You can also become a diehard over there as well, which gives you access to premium written content, as well as sort of discounts on their merch and everything. I have one of their t-shirts. It's absolutely outstanding merch. You can also go and follow Mario at Mario_Tirabassi. That's TIRABASSI. And you can also follow the CHGO Blackhawks show at CHGO_Blackhawks, both of those on Twitter. As always, for ourselves, you can get in touch with us on both X and Instagram at the PBP Podcast. And you can also get in touch with us on Gmail at penaltyboxperspective@gmail.com if you've got any feedback, questions, thoughts or feelings on the podcast at all. As always, if you want to rate the podcast 5 stars and boost us up the algorithm, and again, everyone go show Mario some love, and he's
Please do.
He's done us a massive favour, coming onto the podcast today. It's been an absolute privilege to have us to have him on.
Absolutely. You can expect an episode from us next week, most likely on Wednesday. Obviously, we're covering sort of the second week in NHL season. But is there anything else you want to add before we leave this evening?
No, other than that, just thank you for listening. We're aiming to have plenty more guests on as the podcast develops. So just stick with us, and thanks again for listening.
Yeah, and take care, and we'll see you next time.